Kia ora, welcome to Shine today. Great to have your company and great to have you here for this very special feature about The Chosen featuring our very special Luke Weston.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here. Yes, The Chosen. What a great series it is. I recently went to the filming of season 3 of The Chosen in Dallas, Texas.
And tell me, how did that all come together as well? Because this is not just any old TV show, right? It's become a massive international phenomenon.
Well, I was amazed to hear that The Chosen is now the world's biggest crowd-funded media project. So they've raised well over $120 million US, which is, I don't know, like 7 billion New Zealand dollars.
Better than rupees, I suppose.
Amazing. Yeah. They've actually planned 7 seasons of this incredible show. So they're going to be there for a while. I got the opportunity to go through one of our production companies and just was there as they were doing some filming, got to sit down with some of the cast and crew and have a bit of a chat. So it was an amazing experience.
And tell me about those as well that were along there with you, because it wasn't, of course, just you who had the opportunity to be there during this filming as well, right? There were other, say, fans of the show who had the opportunity to be there too?
Yeah, well, they've really been clever about the way they market The Chosen. So they've let countries take responsibility for their regions. And countries like Brazil, for example, it has been huge. I think 70 million episodes have been watched in Brazil alone of The Chosen. So there were a few people there from Brazil who were doing Facebook pages and Instagram accounts, all Chosen based, organising all of the merchandise. There were people there from the Netherlands, from New Zealand and Australia, from the United States, of course, Italy, and this show is really making impact. Incredibly, 400 million people have watched The Chosen around the world. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I want to get cast in the show permanently, and 1 being, you know, maybe I've never seen it before, what scale would you put these guests, these people who had a chance to visit the show? Are they quite fanatical, quite committed?
Yeah, everyone loves the show, everyone's passionate about it. It's interesting you say, you know, want to get a part on the show, because instantly I thought, this is what's happening. This is where the Lord's leading me. I'm here for that purpose. And then I found out that all the disciples were already cast. But they're all 5'8", these actors, which is the Lord's height.
I was going to say.
And that's exactly my height as well.
Perfectly qualified.
Bit of facial hair, all of them were carrying, which I was at the time. And I thought, gee, I've got all of the attributes to make a great disciple, but unfortunately didn't get the call. But it was a fantastic experience, and the people there are very passionate about it. And I have a feeling that it's going to become more and more important, more and more successful as the seasons develop. And I think what is so incredible about it, and if you've seen it yourself, you'll know that they've sort of gone a little bit offbeat with some of the storylines. It's all biblically based, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that the Bible doesn't cover, of course, like what were the conversations that existed between these people, what made them tick, who were they? Particularly powerful for me was the story of Mary Magdalene. So I thought they just did so well. But just some lovely storylines, and they always bring it back to the person of Jesus and how Jesus has impacted the individual in each episode. And that's like our lives, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And so why don't we take a look right now then at some of those interviews that you had a chance to conduct with the members of the cast and the crew. These are the guys often behind the scenes, the unsung heroes. Let's start off then with your chat with the director of The Chosen. This is Dallas Jenkins.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love my brothers and sisters from around the world, so it's exciting to have you come to our world.
Oh, it's so good to be here. I mean, let's go right back to when you first had the idea. I mean, how did you come up with The Chosen?
Well, I was doing a short film for my church's Christmas Eve service. I was filming this on my friend's farm in Illinois, and it was only intended to be the short film about the birth of Christ from the perspective of the shepherds. It was only intended for my church. I had done several of those for my church over the years, and every time I did it, I felt very much in my wheelhouse, as we say. I felt like this is what I do best. I'm very comfortable with this. And while I was watching it, while I was making it, I was also binge watching a few shows with my wife. And I was thinking, why has there never been a show about Jesus that has multi-seasons, that you can follow the characters from season to season and take the time on the backstory like I did in the short film? Because in the Birth of Christ short film that I did, we were showing it from the perspective of the shepherds. And we took the time to develop what their day may have been like, what their lives would have been like. And it really seemed to have a lot of impact. And so that's when I first thought, there could be a show here. Now, at the time, I had just had a huge failure in my career. So I knew that there weren't going to be streaming platforms or networks lining up to do my show. But I remember saying to people, whoever chooses to do this show will be very smart, because I think it has potential to be really strong. But yeah, that's where the idea first came. And then when we got the ability to do it, we just expanded on what I had been doing for my church, which is taking the stories of Jesus and his followers and the people around him and adding context and historical context and backstory.
It's amazing that you talk about the idea, because it does feel like it should have been done before. The Chosen, right? It's amazing that no one has ever done what you have done, which I guess is the mark of a really fantastic idea. How have you done that so well and developed the characters and taken us as the audience on that journey? What do you think the keys to that storyline or the story has been?
I think the secret sauce of The Chosen is the fact that we have the time in a multi-season show to really explore the nuance of the context, the historical context, the biblical context. But I think when we do that, the main thing is that we're really focusing on the humanity of the people. We hear that over and over again. It feels human. These feel like people that I know. These feel that character feels like me. And I think that by showing Simon at home with his wife, by showing Matthew in his conversations with the Romans, by showing Andrew and Simon as brothers, by showing Jesus brushing his teeth in the morning and dressing a wound. All of those things seem minor, but they are essential to the audience experiencing these people, as human beings. We don't usually think of them in that way. We see them as stained glass windows or as statues. And in the Bible, each of these stories that we read are usually 3 verses long, 4 verses long. There's very little context. And so when you're in a church service and the pastor reads from the Bible, then you usually will give context. And here's the setting, here's the stage. Well, the show, by really focusing on the humanity of these people, by taking the time to develop some of their backstories and some of their just general human interactions, I think in the audience's mind, they feel like, okay, we're actually on a real journey. We're not just going from miracle to miracle, Bible verse to Bible verse, which just becomes essentially like a reenactment of the scriptures. It actually feels like real people. And when you can see Jesus through the eyes of those who actually met him, you can be changed and impacted in the same way they were. And if you can connect with their problems and their questions, then you can hopefully connect with the solution and the answers to those questions, which is in Jesus.
Something that I've heard on the set and from your crew a lot is the use of the loaves and fishes metaphor. And I know that in season 3, you filmed the feeding of the 5,000. I mean, is that a story that you're looking forward to the audience seeing? And talk us through why the loaves and the fishes have become so important, as an overarching philosophy, I guess.
Well, at the lowest moment of my career, someone was led by God to tell me, it's not your job to feed the 5,000, it's only to provide the loaves and fish. That concept changed my life. I'm someone who had been reliant on doing things myself, and I felt responsible for the results. And I think we tend to do that. Even in our ministry, we tend to think if things aren't going well in the results, then that must mean that I'm doing something wrong. And God just wants us to make sure that the 5 loaves and 2 fish that we provide are the best that we can, and that honor him the best we can. And once we hand them to God, the transaction is over. He's responsible for what happens next. So that concept has really defined the whole show. As a crew, as a company, I am constantly reminding our team that we can't focus on the numbers. We can't focus on the results. The fact that the show has grown and that it's been seen by so many millions of people is not what we focus on. And that is a discipline. That is something that we really work hard at, is we are working hard at making sure that the show that we're making is the best show that we can make, that it honors Jesus in the Gospels, the best that we know how, and then the results are up to him. So that has been guiding us for the last 5 years. And of course, we have to then portray that scene on screen. I mean, that's of course the fish and loaves, and the notion, even in our opening credits, of the fish swimming against the current. There's just been, I think, a theme of that throughout the whole show, but not only in the content of the show, in our lives and in our approach to this whole project.
Yeah, very much looking forward to season 3. Can you tell us any highlights or anything that you're looking forward to the audience seeing?
Yeah, well, obviously the feeding of the 5,000 is the climax of the season. That's something that we are really excited about, because not only do we show you the feeding of the 5,000, but like any chosen story, we really take the time to develop what made that story so impactful in the lives of those involved. So throughout the season, you're seeing the setup to that story. We also, I think, are excited about Simon and Eden this season. That's something that we focus on because it's one thing to follow Jesus. It's one thing to even feel excited about following Jesus and that your husband or wife is going to be following Jesus. But when it actually becomes reality, it's not as easy as they might have hoped. And so we explore some really difficult questions this year with what it's like to be in ministry, what it's like when your marriage is struggling, when you face a tragedy in your marriage, a crisis in your marriage. How do you get through that? What happens when you see Jesus healing other people but not you? Those are all questions that we dive into in season 3.
That's awesome. Dallas, such a privilege to talk to you, and thanks for all you've done. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you being here. Thanks.
Welcome back, and what an amazing interview that was too. Dallas came across as a guy who's really committed to this mission that he's a part of, right? It's not just a TV show, hey, I want to make a fun thing for people to watch, but communicating something more of the personal nature of what Jesus is like.
Yeah, I think he's got an amazing ability to tell a story, and he's worked very well collaboratively with the writers, who we're going to hear from in just a second. But just a little fact, Dallas Jenkins is the son of the man that wrote the Left Behind novels. So grew up with this sort of, I guess, sort of making heads or tails out of sort of biblical narratives, and then thinking about how those could be turned into story arcs. So very much a part of his upbringing. He's made other films in the past. But yeah, just an amazing guy. And like you said, visionary, singular vision to make the show with no money. Now it's a bit of a different story. They've got some resource behind them. They're bringing on a lot of talented people from around the world, and you get the feeling like it's going to be a successful project.
Well, it kind of reminds me a little of when, say, Mel Gibson did The Passion of the Christ a few years back, and before it launched, everyone was like, oh, well, what is this thing? It's going to be a big waste, like nobody's ever going to watch this. And then, of course, it becomes a phenomenon, and everyone says, well, obviously he knew the whole time. Kind of makes me think similar things about this, right? That after the fact, it looks like obviously it was going to be a win, but kind of forget that wasn't always certain.
Well, that's great ideas, isn't it? When you see a great idea, when you're part of it, you go, why didn't somebody think of this before? Because really, it's just bringing stories that we've read for thousands of years to life on the TV screen. But I think it's the way that they've done it. And when you watch the show, you don't get any of those, man, this is cheesy, kind of cheesy Christian media vibes. You get that sort of, wow, this is really well done. And in fact, a lot of the actors and production staff, while they are appreciative of the story, some of them aren't even Christians. Some of them don't have a faith. And they told us when we went into some of these interviews, hey, this person isn't a Christian, they don't have your beliefs, so just make sure that your questions fit accordingly. And it was kind of interesting to hear them filter playing, a disciple or whatever their role is. But we're going to hear from two of the writers, Ryan and Tyler, and they're both incredibly passionate guys with amazing CVs. One of them actually was one of the main scriptwriters for Hacksaw Ridge.
Wow.
The very famous Hollywood film. And, just love the idea of taking a passage of scripture and then just developing into what you see on the screen.
All right, well, let's take a look at that right now. Then we're going to have a chat to, watch Luke's chat with two writers from The Chosen. This is Ryan and Tyler.
The writers, I always feel like, you don't get any of the glory, really, but you do so much of the hard work. Are you cool with that role, being behind the scenes, so to speak?
Yes, we're invisible. People don't recognize us on the street. But it enables us to really focus on the work of writing The Chosen and not have to deal with so much of the kind of noise around the show. But people are very gracious. You know, when they find out, whether or not they really understand what writing is, they always say thank you, and it may be a mystery to them how it all works. Sometimes it's a mystery to us.
Yeah.
But the audience is just so gracious, and we're loving it. We're having a great time.
Well, let's unveil some of the mystery. I mean, what is your process for writing? Do you write together? Do you write individually? Or how does that work?
Well, we write as a team with our third, Dallas. We're effectively, we service Dallas's vision for this show, much of which has crystallized throughout his entire adult life as a filmmaker. He's had moments that we've built an entire 4 or 5, even a season around of episodes to get to the place that he's imagined. I tell you, the Pool of Bethesda was a moment that he had imagined telling that story for years, and so we are every time doing the same thing. We're just iterating. So we come up with the beginning and the end, and we figure out whether it's an episode, a season, or the whole series. How do we move through this space in a way that allows us to tell an emotional story for our characters that you are invested in? How do we get you invested in our characters? How do we stay true to the moments of the Bible and not touch those at all, to tell them as faithfully and as factually as we can, and then work in the margins to tell that. And that involves us breaking story at a retreat. We usually go to some place fairly remote or a neutral location. Tyler and I live in Los Angeles. Dallas is in Texas here. And so we meet at a place where we can just walk through the entire season. And then we break it incrementally into episodes. We write an outline. One of us writes an outline, one of us writes a first draft, and then it passes to the next writer. And then Dallas is always putting his final touches on the episodes to make them what he wants to shoot.
So it's always collaborative. Is there ever something that you write that you sort of say, please don't touch this? Like, I think this is perfect?
Quietly, yes. Sometimes I'll have a draft that I'll pass to someone, and I'll just be praying, like, I hope that one part survives. And then when it comes back, or the notes come back, and it survived the scalpel, I'm always like, oh. And then that's when I'll say, I'm like, I was hoping you would leave that part in. So it's, yeah, we get attached, but we try not to be too precious. It is a collaboration, and we trust each other. So if something that one of us has written isn't landing with the other two, or even with one, we listen to each other, and we push back. And we fight for things that we really believe. Well, Dallas usually says, may the best story win.
Yeah. I mean, that's the nature of a collaboration.
Yes, that's how a team works on anything.
You know, the best argument wins. If it's 50-50, you go with who's more passionate about this? Who's going to be
who cares more?
A squeakier wheel if we don't go in his direction? And we've got people like our story editor Maisha who can also weigh in on things to break a tie. Or I get most upset if my jokes are changed.
That's great. Obviously, there's a plan to do 7 series. We're at season 3 now, which is fantastic. Do you have all of the secrets for all 7 series? Are you kind of 2 of the people who are in on what's going to happen in the rest of the chosen series, or is that still held by Dallas?
We've made a plan.
Secrets.
I mean, well, the source material, you know the ending of the Bible.
I read the book.
Yeah, you've read the book, yeah. So we have actually charted out how the rest of the seasons will play out, but it's broad strokes. Like, I think there are still discoveries to be made. There's still things that all 3 of us haven't discovered yet or haven't realized yet. Oh, that's exactly how we're gonna do it. We have a general shape of it, and yeah, there are secrets we hold pretty close to the chest. Even the actors will say, well, what's gonna happen with this? And we're like, just because who knows, it could change, and also we want to just keep it under wraps so that it's fun for the audience to be surprised. I guarantee you're going to be surprised with season 3.
Yeah. I think what has been so amazing about The Chosen, and it really comes down to you guys, is how you have developed characters who we know from the Bible, but we have very little detail in Scripture about what made these men and women tick. And you've been able to bring out their empathy and their compassion, or how they relate to people and their hardships. I think it was exemplified for me in the story of Mary Magdalene and also the woman at the well. For me, 2 very powerful stories that you guys told through The Chosen. Has there been a real highlight for you as writers, something that you thought you did very well, that you were very proud of?
Well, I mean, I think that probably goes to each of our skill sets. You know, we are servicing Dallas's vision, but it's very much a shared narrative. So Dallas doesn't hold secrets from us. We're all in on the planning of it all. And I think that depending on what we each bring, which are different skill sets, the things that we see ourselves in, they might be something we reflect on or learn from. I mean, there's just as much learning from the process as there is reflecting on a win. You know, I think for both of us, it was fun to move through episode 1 of season 2, to watch the things that Tyler brought creatively, historically, from his background as an Old Testament scholar. I mean, these things were all discovery for me. Because, you know, I can lay out the framework for it, but when it's populated by details that come from Tyler, I can then be just as surprised as the reader or the audience. The same thing happens with Dallas. So I'm frequently in awe of my collaborators.
What about for you? Highlights from the series?
In terms of like scenes that came to life, or yeah, we really both actually really love the ending of season 1, episode 2, when all the different characters are celebrating Shabbat in such different ways, from the very opulent Pharisees with their like gold plates and their jewelry, to Mary Magdalene in her like 1-bedroom studio apartment with a blind woman and a limp guy and some strangers just winging it, her first one, to Matthew having Shabbat alone with the dog in the street because he couldn't go into his family's home. Like, we thought so much about that, and then when it came to life, even in the rough cut when we saw it in Burbank, we were just like, that's right, exactly what was in our minds.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's been very successful. I mentioned 107 million people have seen it. I know there's a goal for 1 billion people to see it. Are you surprised by the success? Did you expect it to be as big as it is?
Always both.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you have to go into it believing that this can be something. It's just too much work to not go in with a kind of motivation or belief in what you're doing. And at the same time, nothing works, right? Like, it's never the way you wrote it on page that it ends up on film. It's never received at the right time. I mean, these are the realities of like film and TV. And I think most art, like, you just can't presume to know how your audience will accept it. So we've both been surprised and come in with a real belief. We have the best source material in the history of the world. We have we have passionate, faithful fans for whom this is a life. And so we just wanted to fellowship. We wanted the show to be an act of fellowship. And so we're never surprised by the power of God in moving people, moving mountains, but we're always surprised when something works. Yeah, because it's such a collaborative medium.
One last question. You mentioned before, you know how the story ends, and obviously you're working towards things like the crucifixion. Does that play on your mind? I mean, those are very, very big historical moments that mean so much to so many people. Are you already thinking about when it comes time to put those down on paper and how you're going to do it?
We've thought a lot about the big moments and how we'd like to do them in a unique way, as is the way of The Chosen. We tend to approach things from a different angle. And you're even going to see that in season 3. There are a couple iconic moments that people are familiar with from Scripture, but when you see the way The Chosen has approached it, it doesn't change it. It just is infused with a different kind of meaning. And so we're hoping to do that with kind of these big tentpole moments like the crucifixion. It's not going to be like anything you've ever seen before, because that's kind of how we roll.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating team. What was it about this that surprised you the most when you learned about the collaborative process and how they're writing these episodes?
Well, they've done a lot of the writing over the COVID-19 pandemic, so they're writing in their various parts of the United States. They don't even live in the same state. And obviously meeting on video and writing whole rafts of it by themselves, and then bringing it together and saying, well, I like that, or I don't like this, or this is really powerful. But, you know, I think what surprised me the most is just the fact that they're all pretty much singing from the same hymn sheet. Like, they just get it. And I think that really is a testament to the fact that Dallas Jenkins knows exactly what he wants, and they're just kind of processing his vision, I guess, in a way. Yeah.
And I mean, there's certain characters as well they've taken the story of and expanded upon as well. You've kind of alluded to how they've done that. Say people like Mary Magdalene, for example, who we know of, had a significant part in Jesus' story, but we don't really know much more about her life outside of that. What do you know about how they've expanded on her story within this?
Well, anyone that's seen the episode will know that it is very poignant, it's very powerful. They take you right back to her childhood. Her father passes away. He had taught her Jewish customs, but then she, because she's orphaned, grows up in this very tough set of circumstances, and you sort of see her again really conflicted by demonic possession. And it's beautiful how they've done it, actually, because one of the members of the Sanhedrin tries to come in and deliver her from her afflictions. He's unsuccessful, but has a real burden for what she's facing. Enter Jesus, who harks right back to her childhood, links it beautifully together, and you get this amazing introduction to Jesus as a character as well. Yeah, for me, that was the most poignant of the stories. I think they did that beautifully well.
And you got a chance to speak to the actress as well who plays Mary Magdalene as well. What was her connection to that story?
Yeah, so her name's Elizabeth Tabish. She is a Christian woman, loves the fact that she's able to bring that character to life. And really felt the two sides to that person. A person with a real history and a past who would have been frowned upon in Jewish culture and in religious society, but who is forgiven so much and so becomes such a passionate follower, and then actually joins the disciples on their quest, on their mission for 3 years. So is very much a key character in the story from here on in.
Well, it's been fascinating getting these insights, and as we've heard, this whole series, The Chosen, is about seeing Jesus through the eyes of the people who knew him, his followers. So next time, we're going to meet the actors who are bringing Jesus' apostles to life. Hope to see you very soon for part 2 of Getting to Know The Chosen. Ka kite.